Have you ever felt invisible? Everything you do for others isn't valued? Maybe, no matter how hard you try to please and be kind, respect just doesn't come. It feels unfair, doesn't it? But what if I told you that the issue might be in how you're presenting yourself? In fact, the way you act might be opening doors for people to disrespect you without even realizing it. And what I'm about to share today could completely change that. Imagine never being undervalued again, always respected without needing to fight or shout to be heard. Sounds too good to be true? Then you'll want to hear what a wise monk taught Peter, because after this story, your life will never be the same. Peter's quest for respect. Peter, a kind-hearted man with a humble demeanor, always believed that being polite and considerate would earn him the respect of others. However, he started to notice that despite his dedication and patience, his friends and those around him didn't seem to value him as he expected. His words often fell on deaf ears, and his actions went unnoticed. This feeling of invisibility weighed on him, and he found himself caught in a spiral of frustration. Have you ever felt like this, as if your kindness is mistaken for weakness? What Peter didn't understand was that being respected requires more than just being kind. Sometimes, excessive kindness without clear boundaries makes others confuse patience with submission. He began to wonder what he could do to change this dynamic, but he didn't know where to start. This reflection led him to seek something deeper, an internal transformation that would bring him peace without compromising his essence. It was as if life was asking him for a new approach. That's when Peter decided to seek guidance from a monk. This monk, known for his wisdom and serenity, seemed like the answer he had been searching for. The silence of the monastery, the calm that filled the place, everything suggested that a major transformation was about to happen. There, he would find answers, but also face challenges he never imagined. The wisdom of the monk. As he approached the monastery, Peter was welcomed by the monk with a calm smile. The peaceful surroundings seemed to invite meditation, and the silence spoke more than any words could. Without delay, the monk explained to Peter that respect isn't something you demand, but something you earn. He warned that before trying to change the world around you, you first need to transform yourself from within. True respect is born from self-knowledge, from the wisdom of understanding who we are and what we truly need. Peter listened closely, feeling that these words touched something deep within him. The monk then shared 5 essential lessons to help Peter gain the respect he so desired. The first lesson was simple but powerful, learning to say no. The monk explained that by always being available and eager to please, Peter was making himself invisible to others. When we set no limits, people begin to undervalue what we offer. Wisdom lies in recognizing when and how to say no to protect our inner peace. Peter knew that this would be one of the hardest lessons to put into practice. Reflecting on this first lesson, Peter began to see patterns in his life where he would always say yes, even when it went against his own needs. The monk then challenged him. If he wanted to earn others' respect, he would have to start by respecting himself. The transformation would begin right there, in the silence of the monastery, and over time, Peter would learn the value of choosing his yes and no with greater wisdom. Learning to say no. The monk's first lesson was clear: learn to say no when necessary. Peter realized that by always saying yes, he had become predictable and easy to manipulate. People around him had come to expect his constant availability, without understanding the toll it took on his well-being. The monk explained that by refusing some requests, Peter would start to cultivate respect, showing that his time and energy were valuable. Peter began to understand that saying no was a tool for transformation, not selfishness. The monk gave a practical example that made Peter think. Imagine you're always giving more than you receive without setting any boundaries. People start to expect that from you, and when you fail to meet their expectations, respect fades. But by setting a clear limit, others understand that your time is precious and begin to value it. The metaphor was simple but powerful. Peter felt that this change would be challenging, but he knew he was on the right path. Starting with small no's, Peter experienced a difference. He noticed that people reacted with surprise, but also with renewed respect. His actions were no longer taken for granted, and balance began to be restored in his interactions. Peter discovered that the silence after a no held transformative power, bringing serenity to his life and allowing space to reflect on his priorities. Stop complaining. With his wisdom and calm, the monk revealed an uncomfortable truth to Peter. Constant complaining drives people away. He explained that when we focus on our struggles and share only our problems, others start to avoid us. Instead, the monk suggested Peter turn each complaint into an opportunity for reflection and solution. Silencing complaints and focusing on action would not only bring inner peace, but also the respect of those around him. Peter realized that much of his frustration came from his tendency to dwell on problems rather than seeking solutions. The monk shared a practical example. When you complain about something, it's like carrying an unnecessary weight that only attracts more worries. But by solving your problems quietly, without expecting others to do it for you, people will begin to see your strength and resilience. Peter felt the impact of these words, recalling how often he found himself complaining about the same things without ever seeking real change. From that moment on, Peter decided to focus on practical solutions instead of complaining. He knew this would require self-knowledge and discipline, but the promise of inner peace and respect was motivation enough. By focusing on answers instead of problems, Peter noticed that his attitude began to change, and with it, the way others viewed him. The silence of his complaints made room for the transformation he longed for. Be less available. With an attentive look and a calm mind, the monk introduced Peter to another valuable lesson. Be less available. He explained that when we're always available to others, we become predictable and over time less valued. Peter, who had always believed that being present to help was a virtue, began to realize that his constant availability was being taken for granted. The monk encouraged him to create spaces of silence and reflection for himself so that his presence would be more appreciated when truly needed. The monk used a metaphor that helped Peter grasp the depth of this teaching. When something is rare, it's valuable. Gold, for example, isn't available everywhere. In the same way, when you're always present, people stop valuing your company. Learn to be like gold, rare but of great value. This comparison helped Peter understand that by distancing himself a bit, he wasn't being selfish, but was instead preserving his inner peace and creating space for others to appreciate his presence. Peter then decided to be more strategic with his time. He began creating moments of silence and meditation for himself, prioritizing his well-being. When people sought his help, he would think carefully before committing, and by doing so, he noticed that the respect for him increased. The transformation was underway, and Peter realized that being less available was a way to value his own energy and consequently gain the respect of others. keep your promises. Monk, ever wise and direct, explained to Peter that respect is built on a foundation of trust, and trust arises when one keeps their promises. The monk emphasized that regardless of the size of the promise, breaking it weakens the respect others have for you. For Peter, who often promised more than he could deliver, this lesson was a real wake-up call. He realized that, in his attempt to please others, he often overcommitted himself, which inevitably led to failure. The monk's wisdom was clear: don't promise what you can't fulfill. And when you make a promise, keep it quietly and with serenity. Peter reflected on how this affected his personal and professional relationships. He began to see that even small promises, made without much thought, were undermining his credibility. From that moment on, he decided to be more cautious about making promises and to commit only to what he knew he could accomplish. This would not only bring him more peace, but also earn him the respect of others. As Peter applied this lesson, he began to notice a change. When he promised something and delivered as expected, the people around him started to trust him more. It was as if each fulfilled promise restored part of the respect he had lost over the years. This new habit brought inner peace and renewed his self-confidence. And by keeping his promises quietly, he also learned to value the importance of each commitment. Overcome poverty. The monk looked deeply into Peter's eyes and told him that the respect he so desired was also closely tied to his financial independence. The monk explained that to be truly respected, one must have control over their own finances. Poverty, when left unaddressed, brings a series of limitations that affect how society views us. Peter, who had not given much thought to the connection between money and respect, began to understand that financial stability was essential for preserving his dignity. The monk's lesson was practical and direct. By seeking financial independence, you not only shield yourself from humiliation, but also build a space of respect within your community. He suggested that instead of always relying on others, Peter should start investing in himself, learning new skills, or finding ways to generate income. Peter knew this would not be an easy task, but the promise of inner peace and respect was strong enough to motivate him to act. He began studying finances and planning his future more mindfully. As Peter implemented the monk's lessons, he began to see the fruits of his transformation. By gaining more control over his financial life, he felt more confident, less vulnerable to others' opinions, and as a result, the respect he desired started to materialize. He learned that true freedom and serenity came not only from meditation and self-awareness, but also from the security that financial independence provides. Peter's transformation. Over time, Peter began to experience a profound transformation in his life. Applying each lesson the monk had taught him, he noticed a change not only in how people treated him, but also in how he viewed himself. He was no longer the insecure man, constantly seeking others' approval. There was an inner peace, born of meditation and self-knowledge, that guided his decisions. The respect he had longed for was no longer a desperate pursuit, but a natural consequence of his actions. Every no Peter said, and every complaint he silenced brought more serenity into his daily life. Those around him began to see a different Peter, someone who knew when to take a stand and when to withdraw in silence. He also learned to value his time, becoming less available and more selective with his promises. The transformation wasn't just external. Internally, Peter felt stronger, more confident, and at peace with his choices. The journey wasn't over, but he knew he was on the right path. Upon achieving financial independence, Peter discovered that respect was something built with patience and wisdom. He no longer depended on others to validate his worth. The serenity he achieved reflected in all areas of his life. The monk's lessons were not just isolated steps, but a true path of personal transformation. The silence that had once troubled him was now his ally, and Peter knew that from then on, his journey would be guided by a new perspective, that of someone who finally had earned the respect he had always desired.